Good afternoon, everyone. It is David Schlotthauer here with another detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion for Saturday, July 26th, 2025. In this update, I'm going to give you the very latest detailed information on a very strong tropical wave that is going to be coming off of Africa in the next 2 to 3 days. Will this tropical wave develop into a tropical storm or hurricane as it moves generally westward near the Greater and Lesser Antilles in the next 7 to 10 days? And will this bring a lot of heavy rainfall, strong winds, and flood concerns? In this update, we will be breaking down all those details. Now, if you haven't been here before and you do find these tropical weather outlook and discussions very detailed, helpful, informative, and life-saving, please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that bell notification icon so you get all of my updates as I do upload every day, including live stream coverage before a landfalling tropical storm or hurricane impacts you within the next 24 to 36 hours. Also, share this video with their family and friends on social media. Now, with that being said, here's a look at the latest GOES-19 True Color Visible Satellite Imagery provided by Dr. Levi Cowan at tropicaltidbits.com. There will be a link in the description below this video. And as we can see here clearly, we do have a bit of a broadening tropical wave that is transitioning right now in the Greater and Lesser Antilles today. There's even a much bigger tropical wave that is going to be exiting the west coast of Africa in the next couple of days. As you can see here, there's a lot of convection that is beginning to build. The wave is still definitely off the screen though, but it is going to be emerging here shortly. But otherwise, most of the tropics right now looking nice and quiet for the time being, but rest assured, that's not going to last for very long. And in fact, by the middle of next week, we could be dealing with a developing tropical depression, tropical storm, or if not, a hurricane potentially. Now, because there's quite a bit of uncertainty in the forecast, we are getting all of our reliable global computer models involved in today's video like we did in yesterday's update. We're going to look at the European model first, then the artificial intelligence, the GFS, the Canadian model, then the ICON model, and then of course we're going to dig even deeper into the environmental factors that will make this wave a potential that we need to watch. So looking at the European model here, looking at the 850 millibar layer, 5,000 feet above the surface, the color shading indicates where we have vorticity, where we have spin in the atmosphere. So this is my favorite layer to look at when it comes to a forecast like this. And then our heights show us where there's an area of low pressure, where there's an area of high pressure like we see up here. Nice good ridge of high pressure over the Azores. And then of course our wind barbs tell us which way the wind is blowing from and how strong it is. So we have a big old nice anticyclonic flow around this high. Another weak high over here, and this gives us an idea what we're dealing with. So putting this into motion here, as we move this forward, we can see there is our tropical wave that the models do continue to indicate here. This is in about 4 days. So this is for Wednesday morning on the 30th of July. So the second to last day of the month. And we have this area of disturbed weather. You can see the wave pocket in here, some vorticity to the east of that wave axis, which indicates there is some spin, there is some vorticity, and there's some energy to work with here where we could see a development of a tropical depression or storm as this moves generally westward. Now, putting this into 5 days here, this would be for Thursday morning, the last day of July. The wave pocket weakens out a little bit, but something to take note of here is that we have flow doing this on the northwestern side, and we even have flow doing this on the southeastern side. So the wave axis is more oriented like this, where we are able to get some development potentially off of this. And if that wasn't enough, let's look at this, because this is going to be moving into picture here in about 7 days. All right. So this is for Saturday morning, August the 2nd. And this is where our wave pocket will be, our energy, our lift in the atmosphere, convection. And you can see winds here, not very strong at all at 5,000 feet. But the thing to take note of here too is this wave is still in the middle of Africa, where any little convective change with time could lead to a bigger, different outcome. And that's why this is a very, very fluid situation. It's changing all the time. And we're not sure if this is even going to become a tropical storm or hurricane or even a tropical depression. But those three things are on the table of possibility given the environmental factors that we're going to be looking at. But a hurricane here looks very unlikely, but there's a non-zero chance that that could end up being the case. So looking at the artificial intelligence model, again, looking at the Gulf, the Caribbean, the Southwestern Atlantic here at our same plot system, we can see right here where our wave is approaching from right center. This is by Friday morning, August the 1st. So changing the calendar month here, this is where our wave actually is. And this is a lot more sharper and a bit more organized than what the European operational model showed. And what ends up happening is it does try to tighten up a little bit. At the same time, the vorticity does weaken down a little bit, but it doesn't take much. And it looks like it could restructure itself a little bit more in about 10 days. And this would be for Tuesday, the 5th of August, where we may have a tropical depression or tropical storm in the southwestern Atlantic, right off the coast there of some of the Bahama Islands. So we have to take note of that. And when we look at previous model runs, you can see how this has trended a little stronger in the last few. So that will be something to consider in future model runs. Does that trend continue? Now, looking at the GFS model, the Global Forecasting System, this has been quite aggressive, still not as aggressive as it was yesterday, but still showing that we still have an area to really watch. You can clearly see it here on the GFS, very, very loosely organized tropical wave. In fact, no tropical wave at all on this model run. Quite surprising to see that, because if we look at prior runs, you can see there it is. And this is the 06Z GFS, by the way, showing this. And then if we look at the prior run, still showing something, and then the run before that. So it's very interesting now. This model has barely anything. And I believe the 18Z run is coming out right now. And is it stronger? It does not look any stronger than the last previous run. So this is currently rendering right now as we speak, so that won't be provided in this video once it gets there. Maybe if there's time at the end of the video, we'll re-show it to you all. But now looking at the Canadian model here, this is interesting. The Canadian model has a even weaker wave. In fact, non-existent here. Actually, a little bit of an existence, but fairly weak, not as weak as the GFS shows, approaching the Greater Antilles. That includes for Dominica, that includes for St. Lucia, for Guadeloupe, as well as just to the north of Barbados in about 7 days. So there's been a consistency here showing perhaps maybe Friday late night into Saturday morning where that wave approaches. And the Canadian here recently did pop it into the map, which indicates that there is slightly a better signal overall on the models today, that something still has a chance of developing really close to the Greater and Lesser Antilles in about 7 to 8 days. And then our last global model to look at here before we get to the environmental forecast is the ICON model. This is known as the German model. And as we put this into motion right here, so let's move that forward, you can definitely see still a wave pocket here. Of course, we can't show you vorticity because the German model doesn't provide that on the Tropical Tidbits website. But you can see right here a clear, distinct wave pocket is oriented like this over the central as well as the northern Greater and Lesser Antilles of the Windward and Leeward Islands of the Caribbean, including for perhaps approaching the Puerto Rico area. And this would be in about the day 6 to day 7 time frame, and then approaching Puerto Rico just after this 7-day time frame. So now you might be wondering, why will this wave have a hard time developing into something major? Well, let's explain that in the environmental forecast here from the European model, since it's a mostly high resolution model. And what we're looking at here is a deep layer moisture plot in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. So these brown colors indicate that there's a lot of dry air that exists here to the north of all this moisture that is piled down here due to tropical wave activity, a very active monsoonal trough coming off of Africa, or what is known as the West African monsoon trough-like axis. So putting this into motion, and this doesn't mean there's also Saharan dust either. So this is just really dry, sinking air in the atmosphere and in the upper parts too. And so the reason why this doesn't develop is, of course, there's a lot of dry air that exists to the north of the system, and some of that might try to work its way in to the system, especially how fast this wave is going to be moving. That's the big factor in all of this, that this tropical wave is going to be moving at least of 20 to even 30 miles per hour. That is very fast for any development to ensue here because of some upper level wind discontinuities as well as moisture issues that the system has to work with under this environment. So what you end up seeing here is that what ends up showing up here on the moisture plot is, see how this flow does this, it kind of goes up here like this and then suddenly sinks southward like this. This is what we call an anticyclonic wave break in the atmosphere, or what we call a Rossby wave breakout that is showing up here on the objective deep layer moisture plot. So what we end up seeing here is all of this. See how all this drier air tries to tuck underneath this wave pocket? That is also one of the reasons why this is going to have some hurdles to work with now than what we first thought. Now, there's enough moisture here to kickstart some tropical cyclone genesis, but not explosively. We're not looking at a major hurricane here, potentially, or even a hurricane. More than likely a tropical depression or a low to medium grade tropical storm. But just letting you know, the background environment here is not very ideal for really good strengthening with this wave, but there is inevitably a chance that this does do something. Now, another factor in all of this is the 500 or 700 millibar flow chart here. This is very similar to our 850 millibar flow chart, but only looking at 10,000 feet. And the reason why we're using this is because of a very strong perturbation of easterly African winds that are going to be blasting through this. This is what we call as the Easter or African easterly jet or easterly African jet. There's many ways you can use terminology for this. Sorry, man, stumbling upon my words here, but you get the idea. We have a very strong mid-level ridge to the north of this system, and we have that trough axis that is barricaded down here. And in between these two, we have very, very strong, buttery smooth flow out of the easterly direction, at least close to 50 knots. And that is awfully strong for a tropical wave to thrive in. And what that's going to really allow is this wave to really move in a hurry. It's not a slow mover. This is not taking its time. This is going to be moving off of Africa, and it is going to be moving across the MDR pretty quickly, all because of this anticyclonic wave breaking action that is going to be shaping up. If you follow me on that, notice how this high retrogrades. It really backs out very quickly like that as our wave pocket down here moves in unison to this ridge of high pressure that moves also with it. So the ending result here is that very strong background easterly flow will be more destructive than to help it. And that's why this is not really going to thrive very well. And what ends up happening later on in the period here in about 7 days, that this ridge eventually breaks down, replacing by another ridge, but the ridge will be a little weaker once this gets into the north or in the southwestern Atlantic near the Bahamas, where it might find itself in a better environment. As you can see here, not really showing up here, but on some other models, showing a much lighter wind sheared environment along to go with more better background upper level wind environment too. So looking at the deep layer vertical wind shear, while vertical wind shear here is not going to be very strong at all, there is a little bit of a catch to this. Because of our system is moving very fast within the background easterly flow, there's actually going to be undetected westerly shear with the system. And what I mean by that is the system is actually located right here on the northwestern side of this axis of lighter vertical wind shear that is dubbed to the southeast, where we have shear generally under 5 to 10 knots. The system is kind of located up here, and what ends up happening is as the system gets closer here to Puerto Rico, the vertical wind shear is not only, it's going to get a bit lighter, but because our system is moving very quickly here towards the west-northwesterly direction, the net value here is we're going to actually have fairly robust westerly vertical wind shear. And if I take an average sounding of this wave pocket in general, let's see if I can pull one off here. So if we just look at the environmental factor with this, you can see that vertical wind shear here at, actually, let me see. Let's put that. There we go. This might be hard to see, but hopefully you all can see this pretty well. So at 300 millibars, your vertical wind shear here, or your upper level winds, are only at about 10 knots. But your problem here is you have winds of 20 to 30 knots at 700 to even 1,000 millibars above the surface. So the net value here, even so there's only 7 knots of vertical wind shear, this is going to be about 15 knots or so, maybe even close to 20 knots, especially once this gets into the Dominican Republic as we zoom in on this. I don't know what that was all about. If we zoom in closer, yeah, it's not going to work on us. Take my word, vertical wind shear will be a little bit of an issue with the system as this propagates itself towards the west-northwest. And here's a look at those upper level winds. You can kind of imagine when the system is moving really fast, the net value here will be some westerly vertical wind shear of 10 to 15 to perhaps 20 knots or so in the far southwestern Atlantic into perhaps some of the Lesser Antilles once we go into Saturday. So there is some negativity to the environmental factors to this, and that is why the NHC right now is not highlighting anything at the given time frame. We can see clearly there is no chances of tropical development in the next 7 days. But that doesn't mean there will not be any tropical development chances down the road. Here's a look at the GEFS ensemble forecast from the American model, and there is still a bit of an agreement today from the 12Z output that there is definitely some clustering of models here, of members, that do indicate that there will, or there could or will be, a tropical depression or tropical storm on approach to the Greater and Lesser Antilles. Even so, the operational model, and this is the 06Z actually, by the way, the 12Z broke down on us with its ensembles. So therefore, we have to reference the 06Z output, which still shows some decent signal there. The 12Z output from the European ensemble, this is just hot out of the press just an hour or so ago. Still definitely plenty of members showing at least a high-end tropical depression or tropical storm very close to the Lesser Antilles here of the islands of Puerto Rico, the U.S. British Virgin Islands, Antigua, and as well as let's see, Guadeloupe, as well as St. Lucia, as well as other islands. So just keep that in mind, including for the Dominican Republic, under the gun here with potential impacts if this does become something a little stronger. But most of the members do indicate that strengthening is definitely possible thereafter near the Bahamas in about 10 days. Now, another background factor in all of this would be a passing of another convective coupled Kelvin wave here, as seen on the objective EPS control velocity potential anomaly, indicating that there is some green colors and blue colors, which indicate a favorable background environment for development. Now, this is on a tug-of-war kind of settlement here, because we do have some sinking motion that is passing through the Atlantic right now, and then another boost of activity could ensue. If the timing is not correct here, which it clearly isn't, because the system is going to be moving awfully too fast, that is why we're not going to see much in the way of development. But as we go into the first full week of August, into the second week, that's where we're going to have to pay close attention to, because all of this upward motion environment is going to be moving into the Atlantic into phases 1, 2, and 3 in our objective RMM phase diagram, where it favors most for the Atlantic for tropical cyclone development because of all the upward motion that is favored here potentially over the Atlantic. More thunderstorms, more showers, and that's why we really have to pay close attention through the middle of August. And that's not all. All of this upward motion favorable environment is also going to be moving into phases 2, 3, 4, and 5 all the way through the entire month of August. This does not mean we will see tropical development, especially on its first roundup, but mainly on the second roundup, which is already beginning to initialize here in the first full week of September. And I want to be clear, this goes all the way out until the 7th of September. So this is not the peak of hurricane season, and we still have a long way to go. So therefore, even so we may not get a whole lot of development here necessarily, despite a favorable background state in the Indian Ocean and Eastern Africa, that doesn't mean that at all, but we could also see a lot of activity here eventually once this gets into the Atlantic, again into Africa by the first week of September, potentially. Now, before I do forget, here's a look at the EPS probability forecast for the chances of tropical cyclone formation. First look at tropical depression chances, and we can see there is definitely an elevated chance here, between a 30 to 45% chance of a tropical depression forming in the next 7 days here near the Greater Antilles. Now, that's not all. When we take a look at the chances of tropical storm force winds here in a given strike distance, there it is. There is a 20 to almost 30% chance of a tropical storm impacting some parts of the islands here in about 7 days. And that's not all. When we take a look at the chances of hurricane-like conditions, there is a non-zero chance highlighted here in the southeastern Bahamas of the southwestern Atlantic in about the next 8 to 10 days. So therefore, we definitely need to be paying attention to this tropical wave, as the risk of significant development is not entirely off the table. Now, with that being said, if you haven't been here before and you do find these tropical weather outlook and discussions very detailed, informative, and helpful and life-saving, please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, folks. It really means a lot to me. Very much so, as I do spend a lot of time on these videos, as I do upload every day, including live streaming coverage on tropical storms or hurricanes if and when they make landfall within 24 to 36 hours somewhere in the United States and even perhaps in the Caribbean. So once again, if you have not subscribed yet, and if you are new and you haven't been here before, share, like, subscribe, and ring the bell notification icon to show your support. But anyways, I'll be back with you more tomorrow with another detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion regarding that tropical wave coming off of Africa.